It's toasting time. Songs of Syx is a video game developed by one Swedish knave in a bubbling shack in charge to escape his familial obligations. The longer he worketh, the longer he gets to stayeth hence from the fusty ball and bilbo.
That's the house, and it's full of women and children. I try to stay in here for as long as I can.
Thus, he is creating the largest, most high-sighted and well-polished game I hast ever did play. Sorry, there was a globdine in my throat. Songs of Syx is most commonly compared to RimWorld and Dwarf Fortress, neither of which myself or the developer have ever played.
I've actually never played RimWorld or Dwarf Fortress.
From what I can tell, though, both RimWorld and Dwarf Fortress are about micromanagement. You never have more than 100 or 200 people. Songs of Syx, however, is about macro management. You can have thousands of citizens. That's all I'm gonna say about that. From here on, you can draw your own conclusions. This video is about Songs of Syx, independent from everything else, standing on its own two legs. Songs of Syx is a city builder that scales up and out to an absurd degree as you progress. You'll start out with just a few citizens of your starting species, and eventually scale out to thousands of citizens of multiple species. The more citizens you have, the more you can produce, the more money you can make, the bigger armies you can raise, and the more racism becomes a problem. You can side with the racists, genociding an entire species and eating them too, if you're so inclined. Or you can attempt to create a society where all the species live in harmony, but that usually ends in segregation or you ignoring the severely high and disproportionate crime rates, both of which are morally questionable. While all that's happening at home, your armies can be out and about committing war crimes, forcing people to subscribe to ToastyTime, or enforcing your absurdly high tax rates. We're getting ahead of ourselves, though. Let's get out of this dream sequence and go admire that title screen. I absolutely adore the light effect on the cursor, and it happens in the game too, which, bonus points. The developer said the game wasn't focused on graphics, but the little touches like this make it super engaging. Also, despite that, he has definitely put a lot of work into the graphics. Everything is very stylized, so it never feels like you're playing a different game, if you know what I mean. But it still fits with the theme and setting of the game. The minimalism allows the game to have gorgeous weather effects, or have the trees blow in the wind, with minimal impact on performance even with thousands of citizens. All of this gets you ready to drive right into the game world, fully immersed. But wait, you can't drive yet! Obviously, you have to buckle in first with the gorgeous soundtrack and impeccable sound design. Do the metaphors make me sound smarter, or should I stop? Here, have some examples. Anyways, the game... Something feels... Holy mother of Krator! The music, it must have been so immersive. I turned into an elf, and now I have the role-playing voice. This isn't even a proper English accent. Oh my god. What was I talking about? I forgot? You forgot? Okay, let's start a new game. First things first, we need to pick our starting species and location. Of the 7 species available, 5 can be chosen to start with, and whichever one you pick will affect which other ones you can have in the future. I mean, it won't explicitly stop you from allowing every species into your kingdom, but in my experience, that leads to a great deal of special violence. For example, in my most successful run, the Garthini face daily racial violence at the hands of the Talapi, which has kept their numbers incredibly small. I've attempted segregation, but that spikes homelessness, because I really shouldn't be running a kingdom. Despite all of that, their species' happiness is still at max, and I still forcibly draft all of them into my armies. This seems like a hot take. Each region on the world map lends itself to a different playstyle, and each species has different proficiencies. A hot climate, like, I don't know, let's say the inside of my room right now, has the perfect conditions for farming opium, which is a highly desirable trade product. If you go that route, you may want to start as the peaceful Crotonians, because they have the most proficiency in farming. It's kind of ironic, though. The most peaceful species is the best at producing the most iconic war-starting product. Once you pick a spot, you'll zoom in on it, and you'll see all of the land you have to build your settlement slash kingdom slash depot slash what will become a post-hurricane pile of buildings if you're not careful. The first thing you need to do is put down your throne, but there's a few things you need to consider. 1. Your subjects must always be able to access the throne in order to partake in the legally required boosting of their ruler's ego. 2. Your subjects have to walk to their jobs, and they'd prefer if it's not as hard as their parents walk to school. 3. Your kingdom, let's go with that word, is gonna get bigger than a character in inflation fetish art. I thought I'd planned mine out properly, but fast forward a few decades and we're looking at incomprehensible building vomit. Some people can build gorgeous kingdoms on a massive scale, but I'm architecturally challenged. And that's okay, as long as the kingdom is functional. Plus, then you get disability pity points. The reason things can devolve into a complete mess is the huge amount of freedom you have in designing your kingdom. You can shape each room and decide where each object goes inside of it. You can hollow out mountains and you can fill in water. There are mechanics that sort of nudge you in a certain direction, like larger rooms requiring more upkeep or industrial rooms emitting noise. But you have the freedom to place anything, anywhere, and in whatever arrangement you'd like. It's a very creative and open process, which can be kind of intimidating, but it's also freeing. It's like the Dark Souls of city builder, but that's more of a late game worry, which you're not even close to. You're in the very early game, which is all about fulfilling your citizens' basic needs, getting some industry up and running, and attracting migrant workers. You can't do any of that, though, if you don't understand the UI, which is admittedly pretty intimidating. The in-game tutorial is very, very, very bare bones. It barely covers anything, and it's incredibly difficult to play the game if that's your only resource. You're gonna need more than an 8-second attention span to figure this one out, which is probably part of the reason this game is still such a hidden gem. Anyways, you guys want some soup? I'd explain the UI myself, but I don't want to date this video as much as I can help it, so go watch some tutorials or something. What I will say, though, is that the UI generally has you controlling the bulk actions of specific groups, such as a species. For example, instead of setting Claire Jerkmeister to retire at 40, you set all humans to retire after they've worked for a certain percentage of their life. This makes your dictatorship a totally stress-free environment. The developer does plan to expand both the in-game tutorial and the help page at some point in the future, though, so perhaps external tutorials won't always be necessary. You might think that's an empty promise, though, because, well, it's in Steam Early Access, and that doesn't really have the best reputation for developer commitment. But literally, while I was working on this video, the developer dropped a huge update that added and changed an absurd amount of content. It's almost like playing a totally different game, which is kind of why I'm worried about the longevity of this video. The dev is also highly receptive to player feedback, and is an all-around alpha male.
It's always been the ambition to create a long-lasting game, not something, a cash grab or something like that, but something that can last for a long time. So I've really been working on mod support and so on. And if I say that I'm not going to work on this game anymore, I'm definitely going to make it open source. So that it can continue to evolve.
Large, consistent updates like these have been common so far throughout the game's development, so I believe him when he says something is work in progress. Anyways, once you've studied and mastered the ancient art of City Builder UI, it's time to actually play the game. The developer stated in an interview the exact path he wants players to follow when developing a city, and without railroading me into it, it's exactly the path I followed. You start as an extremely small village, a few houses, a warehouse for storage, and as many farms as you have people to work them. This game really makes you appreciate farmers, especially if you're going for an opium empire. They are the backbone of society, for without food, everything crumbles. You then want to improve quality of life, so more people will immigrate to your kingdom. Toilets are relatively desirable, it's where I do most of my thinking, but you can't build them without furniture. So you build a carpenter. Why am I acting like this is a stage musical? Anyways, you build a carpenter and now you've got basic industry. Industries need employees to operate, so you build more homes, expand your farms, improve quality of life, and then when more people immigrate, you research and build more industry. The game keeps scaling out like this for a very long time, and I suppose it's what you should expect from a medieval time period city builder. I mean, this is how I'd assume most medieval kingdoms began, a few homes and some farms. They'd never expand beyond a small village, though, without a trade good in abundance that makes them independently wealthy. See, I've been hitting the books, I know what I'm talking about. It's like watching a relatively big ant colony, except they have jobs, conflicts, lives we can relate to. You can also do and experience some pretty intense things that modern humans can't really relate to, like cannibalism, giant gladiator arenas, public hangings, the plague. Oh wait. There's also raids, riots, and criminals to keep you on your toes. Why do I feel the need to act out fucking every holy shit? Build a justice system. Defame your insane brother. You can build walls of varying strengths, catapults, gates, and eventually, if raiders do come, you can battle them in a city of your own design. Unless their AI breaks and they just kind of stand there getting pelted by arrows. Or you can send your troops out to meet the raiders on the battlefield. But unless your city is a sprawling pile of undefended buildings right on the edge of the map, that's very stupid. Battle of Winterfell. I mentioned it briefly, but I do suggest having a plan for trade, because certain locations lack certain goods. For example, because I optimized my climate for an agrarian society farming opium, I had pretty much zero way to get metal. So I traded what I had in excess for what I needed. Opium for metal. Those resources are then transported in trade caravans that you can actually see on the world map. Once your kingdom gets big enough, you can even tax regions you control, which comes in the form of goods. Different regions produce a different amount of goods, so the one that would produce the most when taxed may not necessarily be a good you actually need. Don't worry, you can just export them for money, which you can then spend on whatever you want. The bigger you get, the more fun you can have, like going to war. I said fun you could have. Both trade and war often find themselves combined in the pursuit of one of the most broken mechanics in the game. Tribute. Essentially, when you go to besiege an enemy faction, if your power dwarfs theirs, they will surrender to you and pay an absurdly high tribute each year. When raising an army, you don't necessarily have to use units from your own kingdom. You can recruit from any region you control, or you can hire mercenaries. Most units require upkeep, rations, clothes, drinks, etc. But mercenary units only require financial upkeep. So essentially, once you've made enough money through trade to hire all the mercenaries in your region, you can then set out and conquer every smaller faction and triple your investment. I realize that sounds like a pyramid scheme, but hear me out, I swear it's not as easy as it sounds. See, once you start besieging a faction-controlled region, I usually just go straight for the capital because I'm a Chad like that, that faction will send all of their armies to defend it. Although the capital garrison may be relatively small, even the smallest factions have armies of a few thousand out patrolling the world map. Maybe if your mercenaries, I don't know, sacrificed an ox beforehand like everybody else, they could pull off a David and Goliath, but mercenaries don't attend their daily prayer, so they can only pull off a David on David scenario. All hope seems lost. Even your most educated subjects have no idea what to do. But just as you're about to call it quits, 7-year-old Madison Cowlin rushes in and shouts, "David!" More like divide and conquer. You sit there, stunned. But slowly, the gears start to turn. If you provoke the capital by besieging them, but then leave and intercept their army one-on-one, You could totally beat them. And so you do. The faction surrenders. They pay you an absurd amount of money each year. You gaslight everyone into thinking it was your idea from the start. Happiness is booming. Everything is going great. Now you can just buy all the goods you need to maintain a recruited army using the funds that you accrued from the mercenary army, which you then immediately fired so you didn't have to keep paying. Recruited armies can far exceed the size of mercenary ones, and thus you conquer the world. Right? Although constant war brings many blessings, both financially and resource-wise, might I suggest a balanced blend of both? Many a time I found myself with many resources, much wealth, but too few people to effectively make use of it. My warehouses were overfilled, much was lost to spoilage over time, but by suffering from success, I have learned a great moral. Nothing is as valuable as friendship. I guess broken is relative, because, well, now that I'm talking about it, tribute seems relatively well balanced. Actually, that being said, and don't tell anyone I told you this, if you do want to engage in constant war, there is a way to speed up population growth. Using the funds acquired through trade, taxes, and tribute, or the 3 T's of a competent ruler, I like to call them, I purchased 2,000 slaves. I then immediately set them all free, by some twisted logic then trapping them again, but as citizens this time. I bought 2,000 slaves specifically so I could get an achievement and so I could get to the next title for population, which would massively boost my ability to tax people, although you can buy as many or as little as you like, obviously. Although this strategy can massively increase your population, it kinda depends on a slaver showing up. It also absolutely tanks your kingdom's happiness. That part is salvageable though, otherwise I wouldn't be telling you about this because it'd make me look dumb and my ego can't handle that. See, in the short term I had to sustain a larger population off the infrastructure of a smaller population, but I now have a larger population which can maintain a larger infrastructure. It was really just a matter of sheltering the storm, and seeing as I had a newly large garrison, I was feeling pretty confident. Over time, I gave people things to do, satisfied their wants, and just slowly started to increase their happiness. Even when they hit rock bottom, though, they never once revolted. I think that means I'm either a great ruler or a master manipulator. With the boosted production, I was able to supply and maintain an even larger army, and thus I set out to actually conquer the world this time. I took a look around for my next target, and all these people are still way stronger than me. I thought I'd stand a chance against these guys if I used the strategy from earlier, but, well, as I quickly found out, bigger number doesn't always equal better. Time and save scum again. I fought their armies. Seeing so much war dulled me. I no longer laughed as they Beyblade spun to their deaths. My throne was teabagged, my men crushed by heavy artillery. But eventually, RNG blessed me, and through much strife and hardship, I emerged victorious. See, I had sent in a kill squad to destroy their catapults, which is a pretty intellectual tactic, if I do say so myself. As my men made their way behind enemy lines, completely unnoticed by the way, they simply vanished off the face of the earth. I can only imagine the enemy's minds broke upon seeing this, and they freaked out and deserted, and I won. Deserting due to low morale is an actual mechanic. I'm not sure how much vanishing units affects it though. Back in town, your disturbingly young prisoners fight for an audience of no one because everyone's too busy working to support the war effort to care. Same goes for the medieval Japanese idols. What am I doing? For some reason, though, nobody's too pissed to where they want to revolt. You're having a good time, and suddenly you look down at the clock and realize it's very late. This is worse than when you had that League of Legends addiction, eh, son? I'm projecting. I've been really hyping up the absurd and over-the-top parts of this game, and although that's been the focus, the rest of the game is also just really engrossing. I don't really play games as crazy as I talk about them, and when you've spent decades with a kingdom, I mean, it kind of makes sense to me not to. You really start to care about it looking as nice as you can salvage. You kind of want to provide as nice a refuge from the cruel medieval world as you can. I think those are the two kinds of players. The ones who want to make the world better, and the ones who want to make it worse. And Songs of Syx caters to both. And then there's the players who are both. The ones who flip-flop. Those are the worst kind of players. They're morally gray. They don't fit in a category. they're human. Songs of Syx is just a video game. Most people don't play it like it's real life. But perhaps becoming a ruler and having the full range of moral and immoral options to choose from can reveal something. When it's all laid out in a completely fantasy world, how do you act? What choices do you make? In a sense, rulers in the real world are also sheltered from the consequences of their actions. You're just simulating that. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to bullshit a smart-sounding ending to the video. But hey, at the very least, it makes for an interesting game. You know, watching the end of this video, I'm realizing I never actually gave the game a score, and seeing as this is a review, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Okay, so here's my score. 9 out of 10. I would have given it 10 out of 10, but I saw one grammatical error, so yeah, 9 out of 10. Should you play it? There's a free demo where you can play the entire freaking game, so yeah. Bye.